But I think mainly just being like, oh my goodness, that this is something that is incredible to see people step into their power and take that responsibility for themselves. I think especially seeing how that had changed my life and my way of thinking, being empowered, I was like, oh no, people need to be empowered. People need to realize what they have within themselves.
Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. And today joining us, a special guest, Monja Delport. So welcome, Monja.
Thank you. It's about time.
Yeah, I know. It's been a while. So Monja is one of our fantastic and amazing practitioners that we have online. And we were like, how have we not had you on yet? So welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Good to be here.
So I love this angle because your story is different. It's unique in that you didn't come to Mind Change initially with sickness, with problems, with all of these different things, like a lot of us do. A lot of us come in that way. And so how would you say, like, give us your introduction into Mind Change?
Yeah. Well, my story starts with my husband's story, right? He, long story short, fell, broke his back. And more than a year after that had happened, he was still chronically in pain. And I always tell people that if it wasn't that I was his wife and seeing this firsthand, if it was, the neighbor's, aunt's, cousin's story that you heard, I wouldn't have believed it. Right? But I think being there every day, seeing him in pain the way that he was, when he had his sessions, I was like, whoa, hang on. Right? So we went to Maui in 2018, end of 2018, and then he had some sessions with you in Kent, and immediately, no more backache, which alone was like, whoa, okay, what is this? How does this work? And that was, end of 2018. And then middle of 2019, you guys had your first training in Virginia. And I remember when the email came through, I was like, whoa, like I need to know. I need to be there. I need to learn. I need to know, how does this work? And we tried to kind of make it happen. And we ended up making it happen. And I came through to Virginia. And I remember leaving there and being like, okay, whoa, I need to know, how does this work? I still remember saying to you in Kent, okay, what do I do? What do I read? What do I dive into? I need to understand how this works. And interestingly enough, it was never quite, because of me. I didn't do any chronic illness, any pain, none of that. It was just really from a aspect of like, well, I need to understand how this works. So went to the training, was like, this is amazing, learned more, grew, and then kind of got home and started applying this to my own life. So knowing that I had grown up and there was trauma in my childhood, but I think because there'd never really been much chronic stuff or illnesses that I'd done, I did not know and realize how this would actually affect my life and change things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. It's such a great story. So a little context, we go back to dates. So we moved to South Africa in, I think, 2014. Is that wrong? 2015?
That sounds about right.
Somewhere around there, 2014, I think it was. And we moved to Johannesburg, South Africa, where we met you and Clyde, your husband, and became, I think, very fast friends and then very good friends. So did you have an awareness? This is where I can't remember. I'm just making up things in my mind. I was doing not exactly Mind Change at the time. It was still kind of in its conception stages. But did you know what I was doing then when we were in Johannesburg?
There was some awareness, but also like, okay, well, what is this? How does it work? And just really not sure. I mean, obviously that was very woo-woo at the time, right? I was like, okay, but not really any understanding whatsoever. I was curious, but I think that was kind of where it was like, oh, okay, it's curious. I remember we had one, like a mini session. Yeah, but it was still kind of like, oh, it was just because I was curious. I didn't feel like there was much in my life that needed healing or changing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Oh, isn't that such a great...
I know.
Ignorance is sometimes bliss. Okay, and so then when we moved to Maui, obviously we stayed friends, and then Clyde broke his back. Mm-hmm. And you guys were supposed to have come to Maui before, right? And he broke his back, and that's why you weren't able to come and visit. Mm-hmm. That's right. So he broke his back, and he's in pain this whole time. Finally, you guys come and actually visit Maui. We do some sessions. The pain goes away. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what is this voodoo? Yeah. How did Clyde respond to that? Like, why was that so amazing to you to watch that happen for him specifically?
I think just seeing him constantly in pain. I mean, he would wake up in the mornings, and before he opened his eyes, he'd be like, oh, I need pills, right? And I felt at a stage like, oh my gosh, like I had a little bit of stash in the car's glove compartment and in my bag and in his desk at work, because I felt like if he needs it, he needs it, right? There was no kind of like, okay, let's go get something. That pain was so intense that he needed it. You know, he needed relief like as soon as it hit.
Right.
So I think going from that, seeing him constantly like that, to being like, okay, well, hang on. You sure you don't need something? Are you sure you're okay? There's no pain. That was amazing. Just seeing that complete shift in him.
And we did a bunch of stuff in Maui after that too, right? Hiking and jumping off of things and swimming and everything. So yeah, definitely a testament to the fact that pain was very different.
And even the flights home, right? It was sitting for, oh my gosh, I think maybe 36 hours of traveling and being like, okay, you sure you don't need anything? Are you okay? And he's like, I'm fine. I'm amazing. That was really amazing. Yeah.
Wow. What had the doctors told him? Because he had broken his back, and then there was this period of rest and supposed to be healing. But what were they telling him that he was still in pain? Was this kind of you're going to always have to deal with this kind of a thing?
Kind of. And even, I mean, he's a real adrenaline junkie, right? He loves off-road motorbiking and skydiving and all of this stuff. So I remember it was this big thing because he sold his motorbike, because it was is he ever going to be able to ride a motorbike again? So there was a lot of like, oh, okay, life is changing. Life's not going to be the same. And just constantly kind of being careful. I think I was also, part of me was hyper vigilant, because I was like, oh, is he okay? Is he not overdoing something? Like, oh, he's climbing upstairs. Is he? So I think it was a big change for him, but for me as well, kind of being like, okay, well, this is fine. He's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so then you come to Virginia, you do the first training that we had, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to start implementing this. If this helped Clyde so much, I'm going to see what this is involved. So what was that like at first? Like learning the information and hearing what it was that we did and the science behind it and all the other things. What was that like for you?
I mean, I love learning, right? So that was really fascinating, and I loved that part of it. But I think, little by little, kind of like, okay, well, let me change this memory. I think the great thing was realizing how I slowly but surely became aware of what I was doing. And that awareness was amazing. I think one of the first memories I changed, or things that I worked on when I came back, was, and once again, it's the kind of like becoming aware and kind of being in tune with your body, is I would walk from our bedroom to our bathroom and I would tense up. And I came back and I was like, well, hang on, this is happening quite often. Why? Why is this happening? And then realizing that it was that same spot where Clyde fell and broke his back. So subconsciously, I was like, oh, it's dangerous here. Be careful. And that was amazing. Like going in, being like, okay, great. Let's change this. Let's just kind of, give him what he needed. He's no longer in pain. He's no longer lying there kind of squirming on the floor. But now he's there and he's happy and he's shaking his booty and, that was amazing. Just seeing how that had an effect and a lasting effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am aware that we know what we're talking about when we say I worked on something. What did it mean to you to work on this memory? Because the awareness is huge. Like it's a huge piece of this, right? And when you say become aware, we're becoming aware of like our programs and our patterns and certain things that we were doing unconsciously before that now has come into our awareness. And honestly, a lot of people stop there. They're like just like aware. And then they think, okay, well, because I'm aware, I'll just make a different decision. And there's some change in that. And that can be really helpful sometimes. But you were tensing. And so just deciding not to tense is one thing, but figuring out that you were tensing because of memories held about the space in the bathroom, like that's next level stuff. And then do something about it. So what does it mean to you to work on something, work on yourself?
Yes. Well, obviously, kind of like, there's this physical kind of tense up and reaction. But if I thought back, I was like, but I remember him, the visuals of him lying on the floor, being in pain, and then me having to help him up onto the bed. And so it was kind of like, no, I don't want to hold that memory like that anymore. I don't want to, when I think of that, see him in pain like that. So yeah, I think for me, it was going back, being like, okay, the visual was the initial bother, right? And then going and changing that where, he's no longer in pain there. He's now happy and he's moving and he's active and he's, and then once doing that, there was no longer that physical kind of tensing up because it was safe. It was now safe to be there.
Okay, so interesting. What would you say to someone who says, yeah, but that's not what happened?
Yeah,
but that's not what happened. So why are you changing it? Like, what does that mean? And can you really do that? And the big one, aren't you lying to yourself?
Get that a lot, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't want to constantly, right, see him like that in my mind. And not just kind of reliving that and seeing him in pain. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to, whenever I thought of him, be free and be powerful. And I was also like, no, it's not serving me constantly kind of tensing myself up and being on guard and hypervigilant in my own home.
And I wonder also, is it not serving him? Because it's kind of like, how that thing is when someone's like, you hurt yourself or something, and they're like, hey, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? And then it brings attention right back to the thing that you were okay about. But now that I'm bringing way more attention to it, well, am I okay? Is it okay? Does it hurt? And if you've got another person doing that all the time too, of course, out of love, we're not trying to harm anybody, but doing that out of love, does it not then just keep that reminder triggering all the time? Not just in you, but in him as well. So there's freedom from that. And it's not like you're not aware that at one point he slipped and he fell and he broke his back. It's just that the going back to a vision of that, him, all the bad things that had happened, not holding that the same anymore, sets you free and probably sets him free in certain ways too.
And the kids as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really great. So then you get into it more and you start working more. And then what happens? You're like, I have no problems. I'm not doing chronic illness. Like, did you feel like you maybe weren't going to need this stuff, or because you weren't doing like chronic illness or some like intense pain or something that was happening? Like, how did you reconcile that in your mind? Like, how did you still hold on and like, I'm going to do this for me?
I think the big thing was there was evidence that I did have trauma in my childhood. And it was, well, look, this could eventually catch up with me, right? And I could eventually start doing chronic pain and illness. But it was just a matter of, I don't want to hold things that way anymore, right? So, and obviously I started out very small, little small bothers that would come up. But yeah, it was just a matter of, I don't want to see and think of those things in that way any longer. Yeah.
And then you changed more and more. And often what happens is the more that we start to make changes, the more our body and our mind are like, oh, we're doing this. Here's more for you to work on. And that can probably sound a little scary and sound like, oh, that's not what I want. But is that stuff that happened to you? Did you experience that? How was that for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things as well is I had a manager at work. And I think this has been a big thing for me, is I would get to work and she would be in a mood. And, you know, when you walk into the office and you can cut that, like just atmosphere is so thick that you're like, oh. And I did a lot of like, oh, it's my fault. What did I do? What didn't I do? What did I say? What didn't I say? So it was all kind of like, she's unhappy because of me, right? And yeah, kind of coming back from Virginia once again and noticing that, and then being like, okay, but hang on, right? Is this me? And I mean, there were a lot of times when I had to take little 5-minute breaks, bathroom breaks, and be like, okay, let me do some breathing, and we kind of just, you know, work through this. But seeing eventually that, no, this is just her. This is her stuff. And then being able to show up, and even if she was in that space, being able to just, well, I'm not that. I'm not part of that. I can still be me and hold that space for, so that when she does come out of her mood, or, you know, her whatever it was that she was going through, then I'm still there and I'm still me. And just even seeing the change in our dynamic and relationship, that was so encouraging. I think I left that company being like, you know, wow, like I'm really close to her. Like I really felt like, you know, our relationship had changed so much, where it was really one of so much more fondness and I almost want to say gentle connection. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And then seeing that kind of, one relationship, and then being like, in the past, parents, how that came up straight with my parents as well. And then, yes, you know, you've got a husband and children, and then kind of being, like here's another layer, here's something more. Now it shows up in my marriage and in my relationship, or should I say, you know, children and my husband's relationship, where I'm like, ooh, hang on. Well, and then I think just being able to be like, okay, no, this is a little bit of an old pattern, a little bit of an old way of seeing and doing things. And then, you know, being like, oh, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to do this. But then even in that, right, is being like, if I would continue to feel responsible for people's unhappiness, then kind of like, well, what am I doing? I'm not giving them that chance to kind of show up for themselves, because in a sense, like I'm keeping them as a victim, because then they're not empowered. They don't realize that they have the power to change themselves if I'm constantly kind of hovering over and being like, oh, but, you know, kind of let's change this, let's do this. So I think that's been something that's also really been like resonated and really had being able to see that unfold over the years.
So you continue to do the work. And then what made you decide or think like, I think I actually want to be a practitioner?
Yes. I think once again, going back to Clyde and being like, oh, this was so quick for him. The change was so quick. And also I studied social work when I was much younger. And so there's always been a bit of like, okay, well, what is it that people need? Like, you know, wanting to help people better their situation and their circumstances. But I think mainly just being like, oh my goodness, that this is something that is incredible to see people step into their power and take that responsibility for themselves. I think especially seeing how that had changed my life and my way of thinking, being empowered, I was like, oh no, people need to be empowered. People need to realize what they have within themselves.
So how do you feel like your life has changed?
Wow. And right, sometimes it takes a bit of thinking, because apex effect, right? We're like, oh, did I really change so much? But yeah, I think definitely I used to say that, oh, I have a dung beetle in my head. And how all he does is just roll around balls of poop all day long. And that was my way of thinking. I was like, well, and in a sense also being a victim to that, like, well, it's just my mind. I'm just a victim of my thoughts. I can't change this. And then realizing, hang on, like, what am I feeding this dung beetle? Right. That was one of the things, because I think something that I then noticed that I was doing was, quite a bit of PMS. And then, maybe my husband would just not respond as affectionately as I'd want him to. And then I'd be like, oh no, let me go search quotes for the unloved wife, and constantly feeding that. So that's definitely been one of the major ways, is just changing that way of thinking and knowing that I'm not a victim of that. I don't have to keep on entertaining and feeding those thoughts. And then I think another way as well is, I think just stepping out of my comfort zone so often, and things that I would normally just kind of be like, no. Right? I'm being like, okay, well, let me try. Let me give it a chance.
So the people who've known you for a long time, have they noticed a change in you?
Yes. Yes. And I know you've often also mentioned to me, like, no, you've changed a lot. And even just recently having a conversation with my husband as well, and being like, no, when I met you, you were completely kind of kept to your little circle and your little corner. So definitely friends, even I remember when my mom was still alive as well, really commenting on like, wow, there's so much that has changed in you. So yeah, there's definitely been a lot of people who have seen that.
It is tough. We talk about this all the time, this apex phenomenon where you change and you align so much with like your intended natural being that it's like hard to remember ever being different. And we retroactively go back and change things so often. And we do that all the time anyway. People do that without even realizing. So whenever we have new information or we've grown in some way, it doesn't always have to be positive either. Sometimes the negative ways we grow and learn, we project that back and we change our entire history through these sort of cognitive bias and narrative changes. But in the mind change work, we change the memories so effectively, and we go to the source of the maladaptive programs and patterns, and we change them so that then we just align back into, of course I'm loved, of course I'm this, of course I'm that. And to think that we ever thought otherwise is very difficult to reconcile. But it's funny, had we gone back and talked to you when you were in active dung beetle mode, or I was in my complete victimization, to think that we would ever think differently would have seemed like impossible.
Yes.
So impossible. But yes, I've definitely seen you change so much. And I think anyone in our little mind change community has commented, and you are such a vital part of what we have going now, which is funny to think about. You were very to yourself and very kind and always very sweet, but like hardly ever talked. And, it was like one of those only speak until spoken to kind of a thing. I don't remember hearing any opinions out of you before. Very, it's just, that was and that's the way that you survived. There's nothing wrong with that. You were a lovely individual. But definitely watched you grow and come out of yourself or step into yourself probably more. And how has that affected your parenting?
Wow. Right. Oh,
because you have 2 children.
Yes. I've got 2 teenagers, nearly 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. And I think oftentimes that is one of the greatest ways to also look back. I think one of the things is obviously being more aware of what they're going through, right? Being able to be like, oh, hang on, I can kind of see what's going on, being more in touch with, kind of their body language, but even just being able to be that safe place for them. And I think obviously looking back to my own childhood and having changed like so much there's definitely been ooh, right, we should be children. No child should have, this type of responsibility on them or feel this burden. So definitely being able to be more aware of that and being like, oh, okay, am I maybe somehow passing that on? And being like, okay, no, hang, let me try, and as I heal myself, right, create an environment for them that is more healing for them as well. So definitely that has been, I think, creating that safe space of just unconditional love and just non-judgment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's true. We talk about it all the time in the work that we do, going back with our own parents or working with clients, like really getting to that place that isn't a bypassing statement, but like they were really doing the best that they could. Like when you've met your parents at that point where, oh, wow, using the skills that they had and the tools that they had, this was their best effort.
Yes.
And it was maybe not exactly what I needed or as much as I needed. Mm-hmm. Meeting ourselves in that space and our parents in that way, it does open that up for our kids.
Yes.
I can't imagine my parents having had that opportunity when they were my age or parenting us, of being able to think through how they were handling things, recognizing their programs and patterns, and doing something about it, not just coping around it or feeling guilty or shameful for what they weren't able to show up with. And then sometimes that looks like projecting that even further onto the children. So that ability to meet ourselves in those spaces, and it's really that way with everybody. I mean, so profoundly affects our children, but even like your manager at work.
Yes, exactly.
Just opening up that space of thinking about someone in a different way because we've thought about ourselves in a different way. And we do things sometimes. Is this the case with you? Like I can't believe I was doing this because of this thing that was connected in my childhood. Like such a strange behavior that the root of it was this small thing. But making those connections helps me give that to other people so often and be like, there's probably a very good reason you're doing that thing that's fairly annoying or seems like it's somehow attacking me. Absolutely. So do you find that in your life too?
Oh, yes. I think I read a quote once that says, you know too much psychology if you can't get angry at people for what they're doing because you understand. And that's definitely one of the big things where it's like, oh, okay. Like, oh, I see why you're doing what you're doing. And that has definitely allowed me to just be so much more gracious towards other people. And but then once again, I feel like, showing myself that grace then only allows me to be able to give that to others. And especially, talking about children as well. Like the more grace I show myself, they see that. And that's going to allow them to one day be like, oh, well, hang on, I don't have to be hard on myself, right? So, yeah.
Were you pretty hard on yourself before?
Oh, yes. I think I was constantly flogging myself. It was just this like, no, it's not good enough. It's, it's maybe it's too good. It's, kind of constantly being on that like, my maiden surname is Hoffman, which translated in Afrikaans is man of the court. And I was like, oh, yeah, looking back, I'm like, oh, I was really good at judgment. Yeah.
How has that been for you working through that, the judgment? Because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Gosh, especially now in the state of affairs of our world.
Yes. I know you said the other day as well, we should only ever judge our judgment. But yeah, I think once again, kind of like whatever comes up, it's like, oh, hang on, but I have a choice now. Am I going to continue judging myself, beating up on myself, or am I just going to be like, okay, this is what's coming up. I have a choice. I can go and tend to whatever's coming up, but it's still that choice of like, am I going to continue doing this? Or am I going to be like, no, I'm actually going to use my power in a different way.
I love it. So you've been a practitioner now for a little while.
Yes.
What, a couple of years?
Oh, gosh, I think end of 2020, beginning of 2021.
Is it? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Again, dates with my mind. So how's that been like? What's that been like for you?
Yes. It's been amazing. Super interesting as well. But yeah, I think once again, it's kind of like, okay, well, where am I at? Because that is always kind of, you see that come through like, oh, okay. oftentimes kind of like, okay, something comes up in a client, you're like, oh, wow, okay, I can see that there's still some work I need to do here, some tending, some self-love. But that has really been amazing, being part of the team. That's been incredible. We've got such an amazing group of practitioners, and that's been just such an absolute blessing.
And you've had an opportunity to come to the retreats, and
yes,
how's that been for you?
Wow. I mean, I came to the first Belize retreat and now the most recent one. And I feel like the last one is just so much more magical than the first. Once again, yes, the location is magical, but the people are just phenomenal. And just seeing how people just, kind of become aware of their power and step into it and kind of grab hold of it. That has definitely been, I mean, that's mind blowing. Like just kind of sitting back at the end of end of the retreat and being like, oh, wow, look how different people are showing up. Even on the first night, right? I remember someone commenting, oh, wow, look, everyone's looking so different. But yes, I mean, that's amazing. And then, having all 5 of us be together, that is just always like such a bonus.
Yeah, it's so great. I love that you mentioned in your work how often we're reflecting back upon ourselves. And it's so necessary. And it's kind of one of the tenets of the work that we do as practitioners is constantly owning what's ours, reflecting back what's ours, and being able to tend to it. You are the inspiration behind what we now say self-tending because of the episode that we did around self-work and people having negative associations around the word work. So we just sort of opened it up. What else should we call this? And you came up with self-tending, which I love. And I think that right there is part of your evolution, is for you to be the one that comes up with the tending to one's self, one's emotions, when maybe arguably before you were very dissociated, sort of in a survival state without it showing up in really overt ways, but just kind of like very careful and, holding it tight. There was probably not a lot of tending that was happening in your life.
No, not at all.
No.
Right?
A lot of maybe ignoring or coping around, sweeping under the rug. Yeah. Yes. So this idea of self-tending, how has that changed the way you approach self-work?
Wow. I love gardening, right? And I think that's kind of, I remember like opening up a new notebook and there was flowers on the front, and I was like, okay, this is going to be my notebook for my self-work, what I want to, manifest all of this. And I was like, right, work. And then just kind of thinking of the garden and how it can be this enchanted place of discovery where, yes, sometimes we need to do the hard work, right? We need to pull out the weeds and maybe, dig up a whole plant, root and all, and position it to a better, sunnier place in the garden. But just also having those moments where just being in the garden and just, watching a little bulb flower kind of just break through the ground, and just in anticipation of what is it going to look like when it does eventually is in full bloom. Yeah.
That is so much more of what we do. I know it can sound ominous sometimes when we're talking about like continuing to dig up layers and layers, but it is more like the gardening analogy. It is so much more like the more you do this, the more I sit around and just chill with the flowers and the plants and the abundance of what is growing on its own without so much work. But in the beginning, it's like, oh, I have a garden. Oh, I am complicit in what comes up and what gets planted. And, there's a whole, the beginning stage is a little like, whew, it's a lot. But over time, it's as we keep going deeper and as we keep unlayering, it is still so much more of a tending and gardening and lovely experience.
And then sitting back and enjoying that garden and then seeing, the bees and the butterflies and how many other beautiful things are then kind of your tending invites in.
Oh, I love that. So good. So do you have a particular like niche that you like to work with or that you've found to be really fun in mind change with sessions as with clients?
I really do love the pregnancy stuff. That's something that I'm like, oh man. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, I wish I could, have another child just to kind of, put all of this in practice. That is something that I really do enjoy doing, is working with pregnant moms. And I think, and this might be just because I didn't do a lot of chronic illness and stuff before, but oftentimes just kind of that just helping someone change their way of thinking, that it's not this, illness that's attached to it. It's just kind of like, okay, well, this is just the way I'm thinking, and this is kind of a result. These are the results because of my way of thinking. So that's kind of something I feel like those two I really do enjoy working with. Yeah.
I love it. And if there was anything at all that you felt like, someone out there that you could uniquely speak to, that, there's someone watching that maybe has the dung beetle in their mind or various versions of that, what would you want to say to them? If someone could have spoken to you 10 years earlier and said the thing that would have made you be like, wait, what? What would that be? So that's totally putting you on the spot, but
oh, no, it's like, I think be curious about who you are and what you do and why do you do that. And absolutely just knowing that you do not have to be, you are not a victim of your thoughts or a victim of your body. Because there's just so much power that we have within. So I think just be curious. Just know that there is a different way of doing things than you currently are doing it.
No, that's great. Anything at all that we didn't discuss that you feel like we need to discuss?
No, I think we're good. This was awesome. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm so grateful that you're in my life and that we've had the time. It's unfortunate that it took Clyde breaking his back to get us here, but he's going and doing really well. So, and it brought you to us in this special way. So it's wonderful to have you.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks. And thank all of you for joining us once again on the Mind Change podcast. Please continue to leave all those wonderful reviews, give us our suggestions, and all the ways that you guys communicate with us. We really do value that feedback so much because we do this podcast for you. So thank you for joining us, where we are changing the world one mind at a time.